Hey guys, and welcome to this new episode. It was night. A small boat cut through the stormy waves before crashing onto the shores of Tiger Island. On board were two researchers, Daniel and Isabella. They had come for research, to photograph the rare tigers that lived here, and to take tissue samples for genetic studies. But the moment they stepped onto the beach, an eerie silence greeted them. The wind, which had been howling moments ago, suddenly stopped. The trees around them seemed to be watching in the distance. A faint growl echoed, enough to send chills down their spines. Daniel swallowed, adjusting his backpack. "Did you hear that?" he asked Isabella, his voice betraying a hint of anxiety. She nodded, her eyes scanning the shadows that danced between the trees. "I heard it too," she whispered back. "Probably just some wild dog or something," Daniel said, trying to sound casual. But even he wasn't convinced by his own words. As they ventured deeper into the jungle, the silence became more oppressive, broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath their feet and the frantic beating of their own hearts. Just when the oppressive quiet threatened to become unbearable, they heard it again, a deep guttural growl that reverberated through the trees. Both froze, their blood turning to ice. Then out of the corner of his eye, Daniel saw movement. A large shape emerged from behind a thick cluster of vines, its eyes gleaming in the dim light. It took a step forward, then another, and with each movement, the growl grew louder, more menacing. "What is that?" Isabella breathed, her voice trembling. Before Daniel could respond, the creature lunged. In a flash, it was upon them, its massive jaws wide open, revealing rows of sharp, pointed teeth. Terror surged through Daniel. He stumbled back, his mind racing. This was no ordinary animal. The sheer ferocity in its eyes, the raw power in its muscles, it was something primal, something terrifying. But before the creature could reach them, a sudden commotion broke the tension. A middle-aged man clad in rugged clothes burst out of the undergrowth, waving his arms frantically. "Go away, you beasts!" he shouted, his voice echoing with desperation. The creature paused, its gaze shifting from Daniel and Isabella to the newcomer. It let out a frustrated snarl, then retreated back into the shadows, disappearing from sight as quickly as it had appeared. The man let out a shaky breath, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I'm sorry about that," he said, turning to Daniel and Isabella, his face etched with concern. "I didn't mean to startle you." Isabella, still shaken, found her voice. "What was that?" she asked, her eyes wide with fear. The man hesitated, his gaze drifting back into the trees. "It's nothing you need to worry about," he finally said, his voice low. "Just some wild animals. Nothing more." Daniel, however, couldn't help but notice the man's hesitation, the way he kept glancing nervously over his shoulder. Something was clearly bothering him, something he wasn't willing to share. "Are you sure?" Daniel pressed, his curiosity piqued. "Because it didn't exactly look like any wild animal I've ever seen." The man sighed, realizing he couldn't keep them in the dark any longer. "Come with me," he said, turning away from them and disappearing back into the jungle. Daniel and Isabella looked at each other, a mix of apprehension and intrigue on their faces. They knew they should probably run, try to get as far away from this island as possible. But there was something about the man's demeanor, a sense of urgency that compelled them to follow. As they journeyed deeper into the island's heart, the man led them through a labyrinth of trees, the dense foliage making it feel like they were walking inside a green tunnel. All around them, the jungle seemed to hum with unseen energy. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made them jump. Finally, the man stopped before a large tree, its branches gnarled and twisted like the limbs of some ancient monster. "What is this place?" Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of insects. The man took a deep breath, his face grave. "This," he said, "is the heart of the island. It's where the metallic beasts gather." Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Metallic beasts," he echoed, the term foreign to his ears. Before he could probe further, though, the man rushed to a crevice in the tree, disappearing from view. "Come on," he called out, his voice muffled. "We don't have much time." They hurried through the opening and found themselves in a hidden cavern. Inside, illuminated by an eerie green glow, were several figures, each more bizarre than the last. Some were humanoid, yet with bodies that seemed to be made of metal, gears, cogs, and wires protruding from their limbs. Others resembled wild animals, but twisted, distorted as if some malevolent force had melded flesh with machinery. The man who had led them, Tom, noticed their stunned silence and explained, "These are the metallic beasts. Creatures born from the union of technology and nature, driven by a single purpose, to serve their creator." Before Daniel could ask who their creator was, a loud crash echoed from the cavern entrance. Several beasts turned their glowing eyes toward the opening. "It's them," one of the beasts growled, its voice a distorted mechanical screech. "They're here to destroy us." Tom stepped forward, a defiant glint in his eye. "Not while I'm still alive," he snarled back. He then turned to Daniel and Isabella, his voice low and urgent. "You need to get out of here now." But as they started to move away, a hulking beast blocked their path, its eyes burning with a cold, merciless light. "Where do you think you're going?" it sneered. "You're not leaving this island alive." Daniel and Isabella were trapped. Escape seemed impossible. Hope began to dwindle, replaced by a growing sense of dread. Suddenly, Isabella caught Daniel's eye. In that shared glance, a silent promise was made. Together, they would face whatever came next. At that moment, Tom charged into the fray, a wild look on his face. "Get out of here!" he shouted to them, giving them a final shove. With a surge of adrenaline, they scrambled past the beast and dashed out of the cave. Behind them, the sound of battle erupted. The metallic screeches of the beasts mingled with Tom's enraged shouts. Through the trees, they could hear the desperate struggle, the clash between man and machine. How long can they last? Daniel wondered, fear gnawing at his heart. But there was no time to ponder. They had to get off this island to warn the world about the metallic beasts. Then they heard it, a blood-curdling roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the island. The trees swayed violently as if in a giant's grasp. It was unlike anything they had heard before. Daniel turned to Isabella, his face pale. "What was that?" he whispered, his voice tight with terror. Before she could respond, another roar echoed, closer this time, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. They were fast approaching. Suddenly the trees parted and a massive cybernetic tiger emerged. It was a horrifying sight, half beast, half machine, its eyes blazing with an eerie red light. The tiger lunged, its massive paws hitting the ground with thunderous force, sending a shockwave that knocked Daniel and Isabella off their feet. Gasping, they scrambled back, their eyes wide with disbelief and terror. The tiger snarled, its mechanical jaw whirring ominously. It took a step closer, its hot, fetid breath washing over them, and they could see the gears and wires in its throat working as it prepared to strike. In that moment of sheer terror, Daniel and Isabella instinctively reached for each other, their fingers intertwining, their fear, their fate, now shared. With a piercing screech, the tiger pounced. The forest floor trembled as the tiger landed, sending a jolt through Daniel and Isabella's bodies. The tiger advanced, its eyes never leaving them. Its mechanical tail swished back and forth menacingly. Daniel and Isabella huddled together, their eyes locked on the tiger. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, menacing shadows around them, the tiger charged. Will Daniel and Isabella be able to escape the clutches of the cybernetic tiger, or will they become another prey in the terrifying game of cat and mouse on Tiger Island? Find out in our next episode. And that's all for today. Did you enjoy this episode? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next episodes. See you next time. The waves crashed against the rocky shore, their rhythmic roar mingling with the haunting cry of an unseen bird. Above, the night sky was a tapestry of stars, but the beauty of it all was lost on Adrian Hayes, whose eyes were fixed on the burning ruins that scarred the horizon. Beside him stood Elena Flores, her face pale in the flickering firelight, her hand resting on the cold steel of an assault rifle. Between them lay the beach, a silent witness to the events that had just transpired. Their mission had been simple, albeit deadly. Infiltrate Dr. Magnus's island fortress and destroy it, ending his twisted reign of terror once and for all. Adrian and Elena had come to this remote stretch of Pacific Ocean under cover of darkness, their movements concealed by the shadows cast by the full moon. Now, as the embers of Dr. Magnus's lab rained down into the sea, they knew they had accomplished their mission. But the journey, both to this point and back to safety, promised to be fraught with peril. "We need to get out of here," Adrian said, his voice tight with urgency. "While the coast is clear, we can make it to the mainland undetected. We have a boat offshore. It'll be there till dawn." He gestured to the waiting vessel. a small speedboat that had been their lifeline to the island. But Elena hesitated, her gaze locked on the smoldering ruins of what had once been a state-of-the-art research facility. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper in the wind. "I mean, are we sure he's gone?" Her question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken fear. They both knew the stakes. Dr. Magnus, a brilliant geneticist turned ruthless tyrant, had used his island lab to conduct horrifying experiments, creating hybrid tiger beasts that were at once majestic and terrifying. If he were to escape, who knows what other horrors he would unleash upon the world? A sudden movement in the shadows behind them made them both jump. A large shape emerged, its eyes glinting in the firelight. For a moment, Elena thought it might be one of Dr. Magnus's monstrous creations come to finish them off. But as it stepped into the light, she saw that it was only a dog, its fur singed and matted, its ribs showing through its dirty hide. It was a stray from somewhere, a survivor of the fire, looking for solace in the aftermath. Elena knelt down, offering the dog some water from her canteen. As she did, Adrian couldn't help but notice the way the firelight danced in her hair, the way her profile was etched against the flames, a picture of determination and grace. In that moment, he realized that he had risked everything for her, that the attraction he had felt from the moment they met had blossomed into something deeper. He wanted to tell her, to confess the feelings that had been stirring within him, but the time was not right. Not here, not now. Suddenly, the dog whined, pressing its head against Elena's shoulder. She stroked its back, her touch gentle. And in that simple act of kindness, Adrian saw a reflection of the woman Elena was, a woman who could find compassion even in the darkest of times. "Come on, girl," he said softly, rising to his feet. "We don't have much time left." The dog, sensing their urgency, got to its feet and trotted alongside them as they made their way to the waiting boat. The fire was beginning to spread, and they needed to leave if they were going to make it off the island undetected. The boat ride back was a tense one. The engine's hum was the only sound that broke the silence, a stark contrast to the roaring waves that crashed around them. Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, hunted. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every ripple on the water, a lurking danger. She gripped her rifle tighter, her knuckles white, her eyes scanning the darkness that surrounded them. The island, with its sinister lab and terrifying inhabitants, loomed large in her mind. She thought of the creatures they had seen, the hybrid tigers, part tiger, part something else, something darker, more sinister. Their growls still echoed in her ears, their glowing eyes burned into her memory. She had seen enough of Dr. Magnus's work to know the kind of horrors he was capable of creating, and she feared that somehow he had foreseen their attack, that he had prepared for it. The thought struck her with the force of a physical blow. What if he had anticipated their every move? What if they were not yet out of the woods? The realization sent a shiver down her spine. She knew that Dr. Magnus was a brilliant scientist, perhaps even a madman, and that he would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. The thought that he might be watching them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, was a terrifying prospect. As the boat cut through the darkness of the sea, Elena found herself caught in a web of fear and uncertainty. The familiar feeling of being hunted, of being stalked by an unseen predator, returned with a vengeance. She couldn't shake the feeling that their ordeal was far from over. The island might be behind them. But the nightmare it had held was now a part of her, a darkness that threatened to consume her whole. And so they sped away from the island, racing against the darkness, racing against fear, hoping to outrun the horrors that awaited them. As the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, bathing the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Elena and Adrian finally reached the mainland. They had made it. The island, with all its secrets and horrors, was now a receding memory, or so they thought. But as the boat touched down on the sandy shore, a strange, almost primal roar echoed across the waves. A roar that spoke of ancient power and untamed fury. It was a sound that sent chills down their spines, a sound that seemed to carry the essence of the island itself. Elena and Adrian shared a look, a silent acknowledgement of the dread that filled them both. They had thought they had escaped, but the sound told a different story. The roar reverberated in their chests, a physical manifestation of the fear that gnawed at their insides. It was a sound that spoke of relentless pursuit, of an ancient evil that refused to be contained, as if the island had reached out across the water, trying to claim them, to drag them back into its dark embrace. Elena tightened her grip on her rifle, her eyes searching the horizon for any sign of movement. Adrian, too, was alert, his hand hovering over the weapons at his hip. They had faced many dangers on that island, confronted horrors that would haunt their nightmares forever. But this was something different. This primal fear that seemed to seep into their bones, paralyzing them with terror. The roar echoed again, closer this time, and then again, until it was deafening. Elena and Adrian stood frozen, their breaths catching in their throats, as a massive shape surged out of the water toward them. With a deafening crack, the ground beneath their feet trembled as if the earth itself were in revolt. Before them, rising majestically from the sea, was a creature of immense power and terrifying beauty, a hybrid tiger unlike any they had seen before. Its fur was the color of burnished gold, its eyes glowed with an eerie green light, and its presence radiated an aura of raw power that seemed to bend the very laws of nature. It was as if the spirit of the island itself had taken form, risen from the depths of the sea to exact its revenge. Elena and Adrian stared in awe and terror as the creature approached them, each step it took sending tremors through the ground. They knew in that moment that they had not escaped the nightmare of Dr. Magnus's island. They were trapped once more, hunted by the very monster that embodied the darkness of the island's soul. To be continued in Part 2.